What a wild weekend we had for week one. You talk about starting the season off with a bang. And college football week one this year did not disappoint. Had some big upsets, had some really good games, good physical matchups. Going to dive into all that and more here on today's episode of After the Whistle. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Colby Allen. If you've tuned into me before, I appreciate the continued listening of the podcast. If this is your first time, hey, welcome. I'm hoping you got recommended by somebody, said it was a good show. I don't know, maybe you just stumbled across it, or maybe you ran across me trolling some people on the internet and decided you would give it a listen. Either way, appreciate you stopping in. First things first. So I recall making a pick on last week's podcast, making a prediction. And I got a lot, and I mean a lot, of pushback for this pick. And it was the pick of Florida State over Alabama. And I think that's the first thing, I'm going to talk about on today's show, because it was the biggest story of the weekend. I mean, regardless of the Bill Belichick making his college football coaching debut, which went very bad. I think Alabama losing to Florida State was the biggest story of the weekend. And there's a couple things we'll jump into on that front as well. Not just the fact of Alabama losing to a team that was 2-10 last year, because I did say on last week's show that this was a game where I felt that we just didn't know a whole lot about Florida State. Florida State, one of those teams that, since Mike Norvell's been in Tallahassee, he has utilized the transfer portal very well, as good as any coach in college football. And every year you're getting somewhat of a different roster. Maybe you've got some pieces on this roster, if you're Mike Norvell, that remain consistent throughout, their 3 or 4 years at your institution. But then you also have those key pieces like at the quarterback position, at the wide receiver position, at the running back position. Guys that, you pick up during the offseason and they kind of, fill voids in your football team. With Florida State losing talent, not last year, because, a lot of Florida State fans are probably in agreement of the fact that, they would have been fine if the whole team would have run out last year, after that 2-10 year. But the running back, the quarterback, Tommy Castellanos from Boston College, who is a great quarterback, and I think he proved it Saturday. But all the offseason talk, all the talk about how Bama wasn't going to win that football game. And, a lot of people thought, and myself included, when I saw that soundbite, or when I heard the soundbite, or when I saw the clip, I was like, ooh, that's probably not a good idea. Because historically speaking, teams that have always said things like that at Alabama's expense, it has not turned out well for them in the grand scheme of things. After that football game, whatever, you recall Vanderbilt's lineman a few years ago, before they played Alabama, they won a big matchup, and before they played them, they said, when you come into our house, we'll show you how to play SEC ball. Alabama, you're next. Probably wasn't a good idea then. But how quickly we forget that there is something that is just glaringly different with this Alabama team as opposed to when that happened at Vanderbilt a few years ago. And that is the absence of one Nick Saban. If Nick Saban's absence hasn't been prevalent up to this point, it was prevalent on Saturday. And I'm chalking up this loss to Nick Saban not being the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Because the things that cost Alabama this football game, it wasn't for the lack of athletes. Alabama's continuing, even in Saban's absence, to produce a top 3, top 5 recruiting class. They continue to bring in stellar talent via the transfer portal and also recruiting out of the high school ranks. They don't have any issue accumulating talent in Tuscaloosa, with or without Nick Saban. Nick Saban built that brand over the last 2 decades, essentially, built that brand to where it is now. They are the upper echelon of college football. It is name recognition. There's people that aren't even college football fans. When you say the Alabama Crimson Tide, they know what you're talking about. And that is all due to one Nick Saban. So the accumulating talent and recruiting talent is not going to be a problem for Kalen DeBoer and his staff. Where the problem lies is when you go back, and I've watched this game. I watched this game in its entirety the other day on Saturday, and then I have watched, replay of certain plays. I also went and rewatched the game again, fast forwarded through the commercials and some of the parts I didn't care to watch, and watched this Alabama team. And I would really encourage you to go back, find a YouTube clip from an Alabama team from 4 years ago, or go watch the 2020 team, the team that won the national championship, and go watch that football team and watch the football team that played Saturday. And there is a very obvious difference in many things, but just to narrow it down, lack of physicality. Because when is the last time, and I had to think about this the other day watching the game, and I had to think about it in depth more after the game was over, but when was the last time we watched an Alabama football team get absolutely bullied at the line of scrimmage for 4 quarters? It's been a while for me. I think the last time that I will say that I watched an Alabama team get bullied at the line of scrimmage, the way that they got bullied Saturday, was, oh man, you know what? I put myself on the spot, and I'm not even gonna know if I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to answer it, because it's such a rare thing. I mean, they did get bullied a couple times last year. Oklahoma really did a number on Alabama last year, but it's a rare occurrence, is what I'm trying to get at here. While I'm searching for my thoughts, it's definitely a rare occurrence. It's not something that happens a lot. When an Alabama team gets out-physicaled, when an Alabama team gets bullied, that's definitely a cause to take a step back and look at, hey, what's going on here? This team doesn't execute as good as they used to, and execution directly ties into discipline. If you're a disciplined football team, you are going to execute. You preach discipline. Good discipline breeds execution. That's just how that works in the football ranks. And that's what we see. We see a lack of discipline. We see execution. And I know I was critical of Alabama last year on last year's show, because there were some instances last year, some things that I could put my finger on where I was like, or where I could show you there were some things that concerned me. There was one game in particular where Alabama had, I believe it was a 4th and 1, going for it, QB sneak, and you have 2 receivers out wide that are stepping back and shooting jumpers when the ball snapped. Instead of doing their job, instead of blocking, instead of helping to try to get a first down, instead, they're out wide, ball snapped, they're shooting jumpers. That's an instance to me where I saw it and I said, this team is not as disciplined as they were under Nick Saban, and that's a problem. And any Alabama fan that I've talked to over the last, few days since this game against Florida State will tell you the same thing. But let's just go through the numbers here, because I'd really like to. So obviously, everybody watched it. Florida State 31, Alabama 17. But let's talk about a few things, because I don't think the Alabama fans that are pointing the finger at Ty Simpson, I do not think that is warranted. Because if college football has shown us anything in recent history, it is that a quarterback making his first start on the road in a hostile environment like Doak Campbell Stadium, it's not a very good barometer, or it's really not a good measuring stick, is probably the best word to use, to judge if a quarterback is going to be successful or not. I think given the circumstances that surrounded Ty Simpson, the pressure that was on him to perform, and in that hostile environment where once Florida State got a little bit of belief and they got up a couple scores, they smelled blood. I think he managed it rather well. And I'm not, if I was an Alabama fan, I wouldn't be one of the ones here saying we need to make a quarterback change to Keelan Russell. Because Ty Simpson did as good as he could have. The problem was not really Ty Simpson. And it was the fact that Alabama, a team, like I said, could not really run the football. Didn't even have 100 yards on the ground. 87 yards on the ground, which is their lowest rushing total since like 75 or something. It was something crazy. Like, it hasn't happened in a long time. I mean, you're talking 50 years. One of their lowest rushing totals. If their lowest rushing total, if I remember right. Saw that graphic somewhere. Correct me if I'm wrong, like always. I know y'all will. But anyway, so you can't run the football. It makes you one-dimensional. And the problem with making an Alabama team one-dimensional with a quarterback making his first collegiate start on the road, that's not a good recipe to win against a team like Florida State. You can get away with it against other teams. You can get away with it with teams like UL Monroe or Austin Peay or Middle Tennessee State or whoever. You can get away with teams like that with it. But you're not going to get away with it in Tallahassee, in Doak Campbell, against a Florida State team that is a completely different unit than they were last year. I don't think anybody will disagree with that. Completely different unit than they were last year. With Castellanos, not to mention the addition of Alabama's kryptonite and Gus Malzahn. But, you know, when we look at these numbers, third down, Alabama was terrible. Both teams weren't lighting it on fire on third down, but the biggest problem here is the rushing total and the fact that Florida State had 230 yards on the ground as well and averaged 5 yards a carry. That's not very Bama-esque of the defenses we've grown accustomed to seeing come out of Tuscaloosa. Just not very Bama-esque. But enough about Alabama. What they've done wrong and what they are doing wrong is they need to establish some more discipline. They need to execute better. They've got the athletes. It's not a problem with athletes and having players. It's not. But that's Alabama's biggest issue going forward, is trying to get these players to play disciplined football and execute properly. That's the two things. But, hey, got to jump over to the other side of this coin real quick and give Florida State their flowers, because that was a very well-called football game, very well-played football game. Gus Malzahn earned his money Saturday with the game plan that he had. And if there's anybody that knows how to beat Alabama, it's Gus Malzahn. He kept that defense on their heels. They had no clue what was coming. And you could tell from the get-go, about maybe not really the get-go, but let's say halfway through the second quarter, close to halftime, you could clearly tell one coaching staff was a lot more prepared than the other coaching staff. And Gus Malzahn had a heck of a game plan and put it on full display on Saturday. Castellanos is probably one of the, that's the best option for that offense, is that type. You look at the offenses that had success in Auburn with Gus Malzahn at the helm there. You look at a guy like Nick Marshall, dual threat quarterback. That's the type of player that plays the best within that style offense, because it adds a whole nother dynamic as to how you need to defend that run game. Because not only do you have a couple running backs that are home run hitters, you have at the same time a quarterback that is also a very good runner of the football. You have to defend him as well. There's never a chance where you really can settle in and get comfortable defending a team like that, like Gus Malzahn's old Auburn teams. And you see flashes of those old Auburn teams again on Saturday with Florida State. And I was one of the only people I thought that picked Florida State to win. I actually picked them outright. I felt like, and a lot of people picked the spread for Florida State, which it was 13.5, which I thought was lofty for sure. But picking them outright like I did, there was just some things. One, it was just instinct of like trusting my gut. I just had this feeling that we were going to see a completely different ball club in Florida State this year, and I just had a feeling. It was like a little sixth sense, where I had a feeling that we were going to see a different team. I had a feeling that, one, it was in Tallahassee, it was at Doak Campbell. I felt like that was in their favor as well. Turns out, sure was, and was able to cash in on it this weekend on Prize Picks. It's pretty awesome. If you aren't playing daily fantasy, be sure to check out Prize Picks. It's really good platform if you're new to sports gambling, if you're new to sports betting or anything. It's a very, very easy platform to navigate. You just go on there, you pick certain players. Players will have certain totals like passing yards, rushing yards, receiving yards, touchdowns. They'll have a figure, say receiving touchdown 0.5. You pick less or more, and then your player goes more than what you pick. If you click more, he gets more than half a receiving touchdown. He gets one. Then you get paid for it. And like I said, easy platform to navigate. Check it out. Prize Picks was there. Definitely a very happy camper this weekend. We hit on a lot of Prize Picks this weekend, mainly FSU's rushing total. Hit on that one, and also hit on a couple other things, with the Texas and Ohio State game. But like I said, once again, Florida State, got to give them their flowers. Completely different ball club. Where does this put Florida State? I will say this, and I'm sorry, Florida State fans, I'm going to make you maybe a little, I'm going to probably upset you a little bit. I think on a neutral field, I think that's a lot closer ball game. I don't think it's a 2-touchdown win. It's a good win to start the season. But I think it's a completely different story on a neutral field. I think it's closer. I'm not saying that Alabama wins. I'm saying that it's closer. And I do think Alabama's roster, top to bottom, is still a better roster. I just don't think they're playing well together at the moment. And I think Florida State caught them on a really bad day in their own stadium. So a lot of factors played into Florida State's hand. I still think Florida State's a good team, but let's cool it. Let's cool it with the top 10 talk. We're seeing Florida State's going to be a top 10 football team. No. Let's cool that. I don't think Florida State's a top 10 team. I think they're a top 15 team. I think they could be 13th, 14th, 15th. But I'm not saying that just because they beat Alabama, let's just go ahead and put them in the top 10 and roll with it, because this is, we don't need to count our chickens before they hatch, so to speak. I think they're a good football team. I just don't see why we would make that big of a leap for this team beating Alabama. So moving on to the next game. Once again, hats off Florida State. I know I'm going to, sound like a broke record at this point, but great win. Great win for Norvell. That team deserves it after the year they had last year and all the stuff they had to endure last year. So hats off to them. Ohio State, Texas. Here's another scenario, another game. I did pick Texas in this one. I did not, get that one correct. Much like some of my other picks this weekend, but ultimately that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. You win some, you lose some. You pick right, sometimes you don't. And Ohio State looks like they just picked right back up where they left off last year. Jeremiah Smith did not have his best game. Dropped a couple balls early. Apparently had to go change his gloves. I don't think that makes much of a difference. But either way, goes out there and really, Ohio State's defense was the deciding factor in this football game, because they just smothered Texas. I mean, Texas couldn't do anything. And the line of scrimmage battle was definitely won by Ohio State. Texas did run the football rather well. I think they had 160-something yards or something like that on, 30 carries, 35, something like that. They didn't run the ball horribly. The issue with Texas was, one, untimely third downs, and they had a few they had a few costly penalties. Came at the worst times. There was one instance where they had a big play, penalty brings it back. That kills. That's a momentum killer. And obviously the one turnover, the one interception thrown was pretty costly as well. And Ohio State and Texas both had, new quarterbacks. We had Texas with Arch Manning, Julian Sand with Ohio State. And both coaches seemed to me like they were both trying to manage their quarterbacks the same exact way. They weren't trying to throw their young quarterback into the fire early. I feel like both play callers had a very conservative approach to this football game. I feel like you saw that. You didn't see a whole lot of downfield shots from either football team. You saw a lot of handoffs and checkdowns and screens and things of that sort to try to get these players and get these quarterbacks into more of a rhythm. I don't think they wanted to put too much on one or the other's shoulders. And that's understandable. I mean, that's the last thing you want to do is just throw a kid to the wolves, making his first collegiate start. That's never a good recipe for any kind of success at that level. I mean, at the end of the day, these are just kids. These aren't grown men. These aren't professionals. These aren't 35-year-olds that have been doing it at an elite level for 13 years. They're college kids. So Ohio State, to me, is the best team in the country from what I saw Saturday. I would rank Ohio State number one just because of the sheer fact that they looked very dominating on the defensive side of the ball. And that was the number one football team in the country that they held to 7 points. A Steve Sarkisian offense being held to 7 points is a very, very difficult thing to do, just given the fact that he's one of the more, intricate and one of the better play callers in today's game. And to hold them to 7 points and, Texas didn't. Here's the weird thing is, like I said, when you look at the numbers of this game and you look at the total yards, Texas outgained Ohio State 336 to 203. They outpassed them 170 to 126. Outrushed them 166 to 77. What happened? Ohio State held the ball longer by about 6 minutes, 5.5, something like that. And the penalties, though. Texas had 6 for 50 yards. And like I said, some of the penalties were those back-breaking penalties where you get a first down, but then there's a flag on the field. And who knows what could happen if those flags aren't called. Might be having a different discussion right now. Either way, I think if you're a Texas fan, I don't think that you have a reason to really worry here. And the reason I say that is 14-7 on the road in Columbus. When you made mistakes, your quarterback, is only going to get better in my opinion. But I think now we can throw water on the Arch Manning for Heisman campaign and put that fire out, because I was never on board with that, and a lot of people that I know that have no good reason why they were on board with that, except for the fact that his last name was Manning. I didn't see anything. Anybody can look like a star against UTSA, UL Monroe, Mississippi State, teams like that he was playing against last year when Quinn Ewers was hurt. Any team looks like a superstar like that. Or any player can look like a superstar. But we're so quick to throw the kid into that Heisman conversation. Paul Feinbaum. And there's no love lost between me and Paul Feinbaum's horrendous college football takes. I really do not see how the man has a job. I don't see how he remains employed with ESPN. Best quarterback we've seen since Tim Tebow. Generational talent. On what grounds? What are we basing this off of? I mean, do people forget how good Tim Tebow was? People forget the competitor that he was, how good he was running the football. And we're putting Arch Manning in that category. Well, he's made 3 starts, and those starts came against subpar competition. I just don't. The times that we saw Arch come in last year against elite defenses, he looked lost, just like he did Saturday. So I just don't understand where that came from. Unless somebody's slipping Paul Feinbaum money under the table to just talk and hype up Arch. I don't understand it. I don't get how a man who's been on the airwaves as long as he has and has been on his face on the television talking college football as long as he has, I do not understand how we're coming to that place where Arch Manning is the best quarterback prospect we've seen since Tim Tebow. I disagree. Not even respectfully disagree. Disrespectfully disagree. So maybe this is a lesson learned to everybody. And I'm not bashing Arch. I think he's got a lot of talent, but go back and look at who the kid was playing in high school. The kid is, what is he, 6'5", 230 pounds. He had defensive linemen coming after him that were 5'11", 190. He was throwing the football to 6'3", 200-pound wide receivers being covered by 5'7", 160-pound corners. I mean, we're not. Does he have the physical traits? Yes. Does he have the size? Does he have the arm? Yes. He's going to only get better and he's going to mature, but can we please, you're damaging these quarterbacks. Paul Feinbaum. You're damaging quarterbacks like this by talking them up. And then you get the fans all gung-ho on this kid. The fans are talking this kid up. Arch for Heisman. This and that and this and that. And you're talking this kid up, and then when he doesn't perform up to the standard that you've set for him, then the fans are like, well, I don't know. Do we need to make a change? I've seen so many Texas fans just from one game on the road in Columbus. I've seen so many fans that are thinking, hey, is Arch really the guy? It's a question that definitely warrants an answer, but I don't think we can provide an answer at this very moment. I think he's got a lot of room to grow. I think he's got the intangibles and he's got the arm, he's got the talent. But for a guy like Paul Feinbaum to say that's the best quarterback in the SEC without taking really a snap as the starter against SEC competition, or the only Power 5 school that he's really played up to this point is Mississippi State, who had the worst pass defense in the SEC last year. It's just, we're doing a disservice to these kids. And it goes without saying, though, also, that we just need to, we need to watch. We need to really dive into what we're looking at here, and really, because to me, he's like the 4th best quarterback in the SEC on his best day. I think Lenore Sellers is better. I think Garrett Nussmeier is better. You could even make the argument, DJ Lagway's better for sure. More polished passer. That's 3. On Arch's best days, 4th. He might even be further back than that, to me, in my opinion. Could he get to that level? Yes, but you can't watch that football game Saturday and tell me that kid's on the same page as DJ Lagway, Lenore Sellers, and Garrett Nussmeier. You can't tell me he's there. He's not there. Garrett Nussmeier is a far more polished passer than Arch Manning, and Garrett Nussmeier's seen a lot more football. Same with Lenore Sellers. He's already got a full year as a starter under his belt. He's entering his 2nd year as a starter. DJ Lagway, aside from a couple injuries, a couple weeks missed last year, he's entering his second year as the starter of the Florida Gators. It will come with time, but we have to be patient. If you're an Arch fan, if you're a Texas fan, you just got to be patient with the kid. 14-7 on the road at the Shoe is not anything to hang your head about in your first start as a college quarterback. It's not anything. It could have been a lot worse. He could have gone out there and thrown for 50 yards, thrown 3 interceptions, fumbled the ball once. Could have been worse. That's all I'm saying. But either way, to me, Ohio State, in my opinion, best football team in the country, and Texas should only slide back to about 3rd or 4th, I think. So one of the other games that I'd like to talk about, and it was another good football game, LSU Clemson. This was a game that I was really looking forward to, mainly for the sheer fact of Cade Klubnik versus Garrett Nussmeier. I felt like it was going to be a very good quarterback battle. LSU wins this one 17-10. The key factor in this football game to me was LSU's ability to run the ball versus Clemson's inability to run the football. Clemson had 31 yards on 20 rush attempts, 1.6 yards a carry. Not a great showing on that front. And that's something that Clemson definitely is going to have to work on if they want to be in that national championship discussion. And I did kind of have them in that discussion. I felt like their defense, which showed some flashes Saturday for sure, I feel like their defense is their bright spot. But the one area I feel like is an area of concern, if I'm a Clemson fan and I'm looking at this team, I feel like the inability to run the football is definitely a red flag for me for this football team, because if they're not able to run the football, it puts a lot more on Cade Klubnik. And as good as he is, he's not the type of quarterback that you want all of that weight on his shoulders. I don't think that's what you want. I don't think if you really got down and asked Dabo, I really don't think that's what you want to do with Cade Klubnik, is put the weight of winning football games all squarely on his shoulders. That's just not a good recipe. It's not a good recipe to win football games. He's just not that type of quarterback. I wouldn't even say he's a system quarterback. I think he's better than that, but I think he's the type of quarterback where if you can run the football, you take a lot off of him and he can free up a little bit. It makes his passing game more effective. It makes him a more effective quarterback if you're able to run the football. That's all I'm saying. That's true with a lot of quarterbacks, not just Cade Klubnik, but it's true with a lot. And I feel like that was the difference in the football game. LSU made Clemson one-dimensional. LSU was a little bit more balanced. I think they had over 100 yards on the ground, 250 yards passing. So they were a little bit more balanced than Clemson. They still didn't run the football. They still didn't, set it on fire, so to speak. I mean, they averaged 3 yards a carry. So they didn't really set the woods on fire, as we say down south. But Garrett Nussmeier, ultimately an efficient football game, 28-38, 232 yards and a touchdown. Klubnik completed about 50% of his passes. I think it was 19-38, 230 yards. Definitely need to clean up a little bit of that. 50% completion is not what we want to see. We want to flirt with that 70%. We want to flirt with the upper 60s. Get as close to 70% as we can is where we kind of want to be. But 19-38 is not going to cut it. And he's not a volume passer. Cade Klubnik's not a guy like a Nussmeier. We saw Garrett Nussmeier last year on a couple occasions have to sling the rock 40 or 50 times, and he did it well. And he threw for 400-plus yards or whatever. Cade Klubnik's not a high-volume passer. If you're relying on Cade Klubnik to sling the rock 40 or 50 times a game, that's not a good recipe to win 38 times is way too much in my opinion. I think he needs to be throwing the ball 30 times max. But you need to be able to run the football. Your leading rusher cannot have 5 carries for 16 yards. Can't happen if you're the Clemson Tigers. So moving forward, I think that's the thing that needs to be addressed with this football team, that they've got to run the football better. And their upcoming schedule, they got Georgia Tech on the road, then they got Syracuse at home, they got North Carolina on the road, Boston College on the road. They do not see a ranked team until October 18th when they see SMU. I mean, I don't think Clemson is going to have any realistic competition until November 8th when they play Florida State in Death Valley. I think that's the next game Clemson's going to have to where, and that's a lot of time in between now and then to get the kinks worked out and iron out the wrinkles and get to running the football better. And that's ultimately, to me, if I had a to-do list, I'm putting that on the top of the to-do list if I'm Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers. We got to run the football. Got to be able to be more balanced on offense, and we cannot be one-dimensional. That's not a good recipe for success. So I know I do have some obviously I'm going to talk about a few more games here, but one of the ones we want to get into, I know I said Syracuse, Tennessee. Game ended up being just a blowout, really. Tennessee just ran away with it. Joey Aguilar had a really good game. I know I kind of picked Syracuse to kind of come in and upset Tennessee. Joey Aguilar, played a respectable football game. They ran the ball relatively well. Syracuse really didn't show a whole lot of fight, and the 2 turnovers proved to be very costly. But Tennessee's offense ultimately way too explosive for Syracuse. Syracuse really didn't have an answer for it all game. Kind of watching it and you just kind of scratching your head. They just they didn't make any adjustments. They didn't have any answers. And it just proves that Syracuse of last year it's not the same team this year as it was last year. So unfortunate for them, but Syracuse not near up to par with where they were at this point last year, really midway through last year's season when they were, playing some really good football. Virginia Tech, South Carolina. This game actually was tighter than I thought it was going to be, and then South Carolina eventually pulled away in the latter stages of the football game. But for a while, this Virginia Tech football team really held their own in a game that I thought that they really wouldn't have had any chance whatsoever. These guys had, a lot better football game than what I was expecting. Kyron Drones, who is a respectable quarterback, 2 interceptions proved to be costly for him in the game. But bright spots for Virginia Tech, Donovan Green for sure, and Marcellus Hawkins. Marcellus Hawkins and Donovan Green both, your leading rusher, your leading receiver. But Virginia Tech's got some things to build off of here. And I saw some things that I really liked. Mainly, they got a lot of heart. And they showed a lot of fight towards the end of this game. Even when South Carolina was just beating them down towards the end of the game. But ultimately, Lenore Sellers, I mean, what can I say about that guy? A lot of people are calling him Anthony Richardson 2.0. Don't really think that's, I don't really think that's an accurate, way to talk about, Lenore Sellers. I honestly think he's a better thrower of the football than Anthony Richardson was at this stage in his career. And Lenore Sellers still has this year and next year to develop. So I feel like we will see him only get better from this stage forward. And didn't have to really rely on him throwing the football that much to begin with anyway. He only threw 12 of 19 for 209 yards. So South Carolina just, ran the football effectively. Didn't really run the football for a, whole lot of yards. Didn't average a whole lot of yards a carry, but 3.8 yards a carry is respectable, and 125 yards on 34 carries. So did what they needed to do. But, this game ultimately, I felt like it was going to be a bloodbath and proved to be a little bit more interesting. It actually kept me awake watching it. So it was a good time we were down at the beach with my family. It would have been a good time for me to catch a little midday nap. But, game definitely was interesting enough to a point where I couldn't. So, but South Carolina, I still will keep saying they are a force to be reckoned with. This season in the SEC, I feel like they're going to they're only going to get better. They're only going to get better from here and improve. Lenore Sellers is going to improve. And, Lord help the people that have to go to Columbia and play that football team this year. It's going to be a tough ask for a lot of people to go into Columbia and play that football team. They're very physical, very big. They're going to hit you in the mouth. So, to wrap things up, okay, and I've gotten into some intense back and forths with some people on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, about this next football game being Notre Dame-Miami. And the reason is, Miami fans, I know I've got some Miami fans out there, don't take this personal, y'all are annoying on social media. Absolutely annoying. It's 2025. It's not the 90s anymore. Nobody thinks that Miami's a powerhouse right now. It's in the 90s. You're a good football team, but you're not what you were in the 90s and early 2000s. You're not. Those rosters aren't in Coral Gables anymore. So heaven forbid I post something critical about somebody on your football team. And we're going to act like, somebody can't have a different opinion. And all I said, and this is no hate, me being a Georgia fan, a lot of people are just going to hate Carson Beck just because he left Athens and went to Miami. Hey, man, if you felt like what you were doing was the best for your situation, go ahead. Do it. It's not no hate personally on Carson Beck. But the fact of the matter is I got so sick of hearing the announcers on this game act like the University of Georgia mistreated Carson Beck. Mistreated him. Like the insinuation that Carson Beck left UGA because UGA didn't want anything to do with him anymore. Like the coaching staff didn't want anything to do with him anymore. His teammates didn't like him. His whatever. Bull crap. Like just can it? Like it's stupid the type of sound bites and the type of talking points that we try to generate just because we don't have anything to talk about. And it's, oh, he was done so unfair by Georgia. When? Please explain to me when. Because there's a lot of schools, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, there's a lot of schools that their quarterback throws 3 interceptions in a dang football game. He's getting pulled. Name me one time Kirby Smart pulled Carson Beck because he threw too many picks. Matter of fact, go watch the locker room footage at halftime of a football game where Carson Beck threw 2 interceptions and fumbled a football in the first half, and look at the message that Kirby Smart was sending out to the team during halftime. You can go find it. It's on SEC Nation, I think, posted it. But he's offering up words of encouragement to Carson. He's got his hand on his shoulder. He's like, y'all don't understand how hard it is to play this position. It's a tough position. It's the most criticized position. We're going to be behind him, and we got to help him out as a football team. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what he was saying. The kid wasn't mistreated. So stop making crap up for clicks. Stop making crap up just so people will tune into your page or tune into your podcast. But what I can say is, outside looking in, I am an analyst. I like to look at football games and watch this. And the notion that Carson Beck is just all of a sudden a top-tier quarterback in the NCAA. Okay, let's look at something really quick. He throws for 205 yards on 20 completions. His average yard per completion was 5.5 yards. Most of the passes completed were not even 6 yards down the field. He was constantly all night checking down. The one of the times he threw deep down the field, both times actually that he threw more than 20 yards down the field. The first time, the receiver adjusted on the route and caught it. Now, not a bad throw by Carson Beck. I'm not going to say that it was a horrible throw, but he threw it to the left side of the field. The receiver turns and pivots and adjusts, catches the football. The second time, the receiver makes an absolute SportsCenter top 10-esque catch to complete the pass. Other than that, the kid was a check down merchant. And Miami fans all on Twitter, oh, he did it against a top 5 secondary. I had a guy tell me that Notre Dame had a consensus top 5 secondary. First off, the guy didn't even spell consensus right. So therefore, as soon as I see the fact that you spell consensus wrong, I'm not gonna give your opinion the time of day. But then you say consensus top 5 secondary. From who? Who said that? Top 5 secondary last year? Yeah, sure. They were one of the best secondaries in college football last year, with Xavier Watts and a couple of those other guys. And, but they're not this year. They're not the same secondary they were last year. So we're not going to pretend like Carson Beck is, we're not going to pretend like, oh, Georgia's missing out because they don't have Carson Beck and he just beat Notre Dame and Gunnar Stockton couldn't beat Notre Dame. Gunnar Stockton played a completely different Notre Dame team last year than Carson Beck played the other night. End of story. I'm not going to hear your dumb argument otherwise. All in all, though, Miami doesn't have a bad football team. I'll say Miami's good up front. They have a good defensive line. They have a good offensive line. It's probably the best offensive line I've seen in Miami definitely in the last few years, possibly last 10 years. They have a great unit up front that's able to protect Beck, and he's able to get through his progressions to get to those checkdowns, regardless of if he's whatever reason he has for not wanting to push the ball down the field, whether it's a play calling issue, whether it's just scared to throw the ball down the field, doesn't want to thread the needle, doesn't want to risk it, whatever. The fact is his offensive line's given enough time to make those decisions. So great offensive line play from Miami. Notre Dame starts the season off 0-1, but ultimately Notre Dame actually has a tougher road to hoe than they did last year. Last year, the one blemish on the record up until they get to the playoff was the loss to Northern Illinois. This year they got a lot tougher schedule. They got A&M at home on September 13th. They go to Arkansas on September 27th. Then they have USC coming to South Bend on October 18th and continue on. So a lot tougher schedule for the Fighting Irish. So could they repeat last year's success? I believe that remains to be seen. We don't know yet, but we'll see. Miami ultimately has a good football team. Do I think a college football playoff national championship contender? I don't know. That remains to be seen as well. So, ultimately, though, man, week 1, what a great kickoff. I'm so glad that college football is back. I'm so glad to be here hosting my podcast again, talking to you guys. It is definitely it's definitely fun to me. And I don't know if y'all can tell, but I enjoy doing this. It's a hobby for me, for sure. I could have 0 people tune in and listen. I could have 100 people tune in and listen. And, the thoughts are going to be the same. It's all going to be the same for me. And so for that, I thank you. Thank you for tuning in. For the people that continue to tell people about the show, recommend the show, I appreciate it again. And I can't say enough how much I enjoy the kind words and enjoy the encouragement. Like something as simple as just saying like, hey man, the show's doing great. Sounds great. You're doing good. Whatever. Don't care. And if you disagree with me, hey, that's fine. This is opinion based. I might say something you don't like and, ask me if I care. Nope. This is my show. I have opinions just like you do. You have an opinion that I don't think I know what I'm talking about? It's your opinion. It's wrong, but, you got one. Just like everybody else. So, but week 2 coming up, not as many marquee matchups as we saw. We do have a few coming up that we will preview later in the week. But like I said, really don't have anything. I think we got Oklahoma State, Oregon. A lot of teams are playing. We got Michigan, Oklahoma, which is kind of the premier game of the weekend. College game day is going to be there in Norman. Oklahoma currently favored by 5.5 points. We'll talk about that more in depth. Ole Miss, Kentucky. Ole Miss trying to get revenge, from Kentucky, from Kentucky beating them last year at home. So definitely a lot of off week for a lot of football teams, not playing really stiff competition. So, it's kind of one of those weeks where we're going to have to provide a lot of filler. We're going to have to, have a crazy show. Might even get somebody to get on here with me, call somebody in, whatever. I don't know. We'll figure something out. But thank y'all once again for tuning in. I've enjoyed it. Hey, I like talking, if you can't tell. But be sure to go on Spotify, go on Apple Podcasts. That's the only two platforms that this show's available on. So be sure to go on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, leave a rating, leave a comment, whatever you want to do. Also, man, if you ever have any questions for the show, if you ever want me to do, and answer your question on the show and record it, be sure to send me a DM on whatever social media you follow me on, whether it be the Twitter page, whether it be the Facebook page. Send me a DM. If you know me personally, send me a text. Some people will even call me, and give me some good talking points. So, as always, we'll catch y'all next time here on After the Whistle. I'm Colby Allen, and I'm out. We'll see y'all.